This is the Ideology Podcast. I am your host, Elka Kubaku, licensed social worker and psychotherapist. In this podcast, we explore divisive issues around food, health, and body image with the goal of mending relationships within the eating disorder recovery professional community and creating a space where a multiplicity of perspectives can coexist harmoniously. This podcast is uncensored and encompasses the political and ideological spectrum. If you believe something you hear is harmful or misinformed, please be respectful to the speaker. And also, feel free to reach out about recording another episode on the same topic from your vantage point. My hope is that if, as professionals, we can hold each other's stories with respect and compassion, we'll be better able to do so for our clients. Food addiction. Does it exist or not? Is it helpful or harmful? Does science support or disprove it? These questions have become so polarizing, especially in the eating disorder and substance abuse communities, where people often take a hard yes or no stance. In this podcast, we look at it differently. The fact that there are such strong, diverging opinions on this topic is the best indication that both experiences are real. There are people who are helped by the food addiction model and people who are harmed by it. Otherwise, why would so many be so emotionally invested in defending one position or the other? In our last episode, we talked about the importance of acknowledging food addiction so we can hold space for those who experience it. In this episode, we explore the pitfalls of adopting a food addiction framework for people whose loss of control around food is actually rooted in food restriction. Our guest, Libby Supan, shares why she joined and why she left Overeaters Anonymous. She talks about the hope and sense of community she initially found in OA, a space where she could speak openly about her food struggles, and also discusses how the abstinence-based model, which positions certain foods as addictive substances, ultimately perpetuated the food struggles she was trying to recover from. Libby talks about the shame she felt as an unsuccessful addict in recovery, the growing dependence on her sponsor that left her unsure of her own judgment and unable to trust herself. Libby is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified intuitive eating counselor. As someone who has personally recovered from a 20-year struggle with an eating disorder, she has a deep understanding of what it's like to live with and heal from an unshakable eating disorder. Libby runs a therapy and coaching practice, specializing in supporting individuals who are exhausted from obsessing over food and body image. Most of her clients are caught in the binge restrict cycle and are seeking to break free from it. She is dedicated to guiding as many people as possible toward intuitive eating and a life of true food freedom. Hi, Libby. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Hi, Elka. Thanks so much for having me.
Can you start by telling me just a little bit about what you do in the eating disorder recovery field?
Yeah, so I am a therapist and a certified intuitive eating coach. So I work with people who have, many types of different food, body, exercise types of issues. And I can work with them in an individual setting as a therapist. I have a group therapy group. And then I also have like a group coaching program and one-on-one group coaching. One-on-one group sessions. So yeah, I can work with you individually or in a group setting.
Cool. Food addiction. Tell me where
Yeah.
you stand on it now, and then we'll go into your history around it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a good topic. So I can kind of start with my history of it. So I'm going to say so I was in Overeaters Anonymous for about 15 years. And I can say that probably at least 12 of those years, I identified every single day, every single time I was in meeting as both a food addict and a sugar addict and a compulsive overeater. And I now have rethought all of that and do not believe there is such thing as food addiction or sugar addiction. I also know that when I used to hear that from people, it would make me very angry because it was like, you don't understand. This is my lived experience. So I also know that it can feel like an addiction very much because I lived it. I get it. But yeah, at this point in my life, I do not believe that is a thing or that that's possible.
Walk me back in time. So you were in Overeaters Anonymous for 15 years.
Yeah.
15 years is a long time.
A really long time. a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about what brought you there.
Okay. So what brought me there? So I had an eating disorder for about 20 years. And most of my years having the eating disorder were spent like searching frantically for a solution, searching for help, trying to figure out like, why can't I get better? Why am I seeing all these people around me get better and I can't do it? And so I had like gone through probably 30 different therapists who all say they specialized in eating disorders. And yet they like couldn't help me. And then I worked with dietitians and nutritionists, and I read like all the self-help books, like every single eating disorder self-help book you could imagine. I did all of it. And then I heard about this thing called Overeaters Anonymous. And I remember when I first heard that, I was in college and I started laughing because I was like, oh my God, how embarrassing. Like there's people that go to a group where they can't trust themselves around food. But I was laughing because that was me. And so I went. I was like very young 20s. I was probably 20 or 21 when I started. Um, and yeah, like kind of the message that they give you in those rooms, whatever 12-step program it is, whether it's AA, OA, NA, whatever, is that this is the last block on the house. Like this is your last chance. There's nothing else out there that's going to help. And I believe that because I thought I had tried everything. That was my experience. And so, yeah, it was just kind of it was just kind of this like being in this place, like, this is it, Libby. Like, this is like, you have to figure this out. And this is the place to do it. And there were definitely people in those rooms that had what they would call serenity or abstinence. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I think the longest I had without binging was 11 days. Um, yeah, I mean, it was, there's so much more to say about it. Basically, what I know now that I'm a clinician and I have so much better of an understanding of eating disorders is there's different models, there's different modalities and how to like, how providers, even though 12 steps are not providers, but like different ways of recovery. And
Yeah.
OA is the disease model, which is the addiction model, which is a medical model, which I no longer believe in. Um, and basically what it means is that you have to put down the substance, black and white, in order to be recovered. So with alcohol and drugs, like, yeah, I think that makes sense. You know, for certain people, like they can't ever have a drink or a drug again. Like I get that, but you don't need drugs or alcohol to survive. Whereas food, you do. So with food, you're basically told, and I know that like every OA meeting is different and OA as a whole is also has a different message. But my experience in OA was you do not eat your binge foods. So for me, it was like all sugar, fat, and carbs. Anything processed would be a binge food for me. And I could also binge on carrots. Like it was, yeah. Um, so basically, if I was to eat one of those foods, I had broken my abstinence and you start over, which means you start over at step one. In my experience, you had to have a minimum of 30 days of abstinence. So not eating your binge foods, not having a binge, and also being through step three before you can then sponsor people. So I was in 15 years, I could never sponsor anyone. I never sponsored one person because I could not get there myself. And it was just so self-defeating. Like I've been here for so many years. I'm like, I can't even figure it out. I'm never going to be able to help another person. Um, I don't want to just keep rambling, but there's like a whole nother piece I want to speak to about like the sponsorship kind of aspect of the program. But I'm going to take a pause if there's anything you want to ask or yeah.
Yeah, let me rewind a little bit. And also, I appreciate your comment when you were like, and this was my experience. I know maybe not every 12-step meeting is like this because I know I've been in a little bit of like a substance abuse, eating disorder overlap and have been with people who've actually had different experiences with it. So as you're speaking, and I'm like, hearing your experience and also hearing some of those people being like, but that's not all of it. That's some of it. But let me rewind a little bit. So you were struggling with an eating disorder, binge eat. I assume restrict binge cycle was that?
That's where it was, yeah, that was most of my eating disorder, but it started out as anorexia, but yeah.
Okay, started out as anorexia, moved on to binge eating.
Yeah.
You were searching for answers. You said you read a bunch of books, saw 30 therapists. What were they all doing with you? And where did it fall short?
Yeah, it was kind of this like, first of all, I wasn't a therapist. So like I didn't have all of this knowledge that I do now being a therapist and being a clinician, kind of like being on the other side of it. So as a client, like I didn't know what I didn't know. All I knew is like the feeling I would get.
Yeah.
So kind of generally this like what would happen is, they're the specialist and even getting the appointment was an obstacle. Like whether you had to like kind of go through all these hoops with my insurance company, oftentimes I had to pay out of pocket and I was not someone who had money at all. So always kind of financially struggling. Um, and always like so much paperwork to fill out and not like the normal therapy paperwork because I know there's intake forms and all that. I mean, it was like extensive paperwork, like packets and packets. So just like so much work, even just like getting to the first appointment. And just like this very much like just the look that they would give me, almost like they'd never heard anything like this before. It was almost like I'm wrong. Um, you're doing this wrong. I don't think you can be helped. Um, just very kind of, I felt very like just no one believed me. No one was believing what I was saying. Um, they didn't like understand me. And then I just would think, or like, if all these people are eating disorder specialists, like, what's wrong with me? I can't even get help from these people. And like, I know I have this eating disorder. Like, seriously, what is wrong with me? I saw so many different psychiatrists. They diagnosed me with so many things. They thought, I remember one psychiatrist diagnosed me with bipolar, which I do not have. But basically, first of all, he didn't know eating disorders. And he said that the restriction is the mania, and then the binging is the depression in bipolar. And I don't know. I'm like, okay, I'll take Effexor. I don't care. Like whatever I need to do to make this stop. And like that didn't do anything. So just like, yeah, I mean, just years of feeling like kind of gaslit and just misunderstood. And why can nobody help me? Like, why am I so unique is what it felt like.
Yeah. You were seeing therapists who said they specialized in eating disorders and didn't understand what you were
Yeah,
going through. And it sounds like
totally.
not only didn't understand it, but hadn't seen it before.
That and also like yes, that. And another big message I got from most of the therapists I used to see was kind of instilling the OA model, which was you can't binge. You cannot be okay. Are you going to binge today? Okay, it's almost the end of
Mhm.
session. We have 5 minutes left. Are you going to binge? Are you going to promise me you're not going to binge today? And at the
Mhm.
time, because I really thought that the problem was the binge, it was just this. I mean, it just made it so much more ingrained sticking in that pattern because like it's like you're so panicky and pressured to not do the thing. And it's like, how can you not do the thing when you're so obsessed with it? It holds so much power. So just always feeling like very shamed by the therapist, whoever I was seeing, and for sure was not. I don't think I was ever totally truthful with any of them because I just knew if they can't even accept what I'm saying and whatever it is what I was saying, like I'm not going to tell them more than this. So I
Yeah.
just was never really fully vulnerable or transparent because I couldn't be.
Yeah. So they were unknowingly or unintentionally perpetuating the fight against your body.
Yeah.
Binge eating is bad. Fight it.
Yep.
Don't give in, which is what I know. I've also struggled with binge eating, and I know that feeling of just like, okay, I won't give in. I'll distract myself. Did you get any of the distraction techniques?
Oh, all the
Go do something
distractions.
else.
And I'm like, okay, I can distract for 5 hours, but I'm going to be insane those 5 hours. Sometimes
Yeah.
like it can take the edge off, but like it would still be there.
Yeah, it's playing in the back of your mind, and also so difficult to fully focus on something else because
Amazing.
there's just this nagging,
Right.
and
And
it's
then, yeah,
exhausting until you
it's
finally give in.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Yes, trying to manage all of it. So yeah, for me it would be like, okay, like I'm just supposed to, like distract for 30 seconds. Okay. And then it'd be like 30 seconds. And then like if I could hold out for like hours, which usually that was never the case, it would just be like, F it, I can't do this anymore. I have to give in. And then giving in would be like that release and then the guilt and regret. And then the whole thing starts all over again.
Yep. And the release that comes after is all the more strong because you've been holding back for so long. So then that message that registers is like, food will make it better.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
relate to so much of what you're saying. So I'm still trying to understand like what the therapists were operating on, even as a therapist. Like, was it a skills-based approach or because it seems so like I had seen therapists. I'd also had problems with just accessing people because of lack of proper insurance and that
Yeah.
stuff. And then see therapists who weren't trained in eating disorders. So that makes sense to me. Like they were very understanding,
Yeah.
but didn't know what was going on because it wasn't their specialty. You were seeing people with experience in eating disorders. What was the model they were working off of as
I
you're looking back now?
Yeah, so seriously, I couldn't tell you because this was so long ago and I was so unwell. It's like so very jumbled in my brain. And all of this happened um before I went to actual treatment. Um so this was all in like my 20s. And I
Okay.
honestly like I wish I could answer you, but I really don't know because it was just so
Yeah.
confusing at the time. I remember one lady specifically was like 100% CBT, that was it. And it felt very
Okay.
like I can't even be a person. Everything is like very
Yeah.
methodical, so I didn't like that. I just had a memory. So one time you reminded me when you said like your experience with like lack of insurance. So for many years I had Medi-Cal. I live in California, so that's like I think called Medicare in other states where you are don't have income.
Yeah.
It's like the worst insurance ever. So one time I saw a male therapist, which I never wanted to do, but I was, desperate, and he had nothing to do with eating disorders, and I will never, ever forget. So I'm in my 20s, and there was only one session ever. First of all, just like the way this whole office looked was so concerning. Um, yeah, those are just details that maybe don't matter. But anyways, so he's kind of like, sitting in his chair, kind of going like this, like, okay, tell me, like, what is it? What's going on? And he's being all like kind of jovial and like not so serious. And I'm over here like, I think I'm dying. Like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm so desperate. And here's this man in front of me that's just kind of like, oh, what's up? And so I'm telling him, but like, this binging thing, like, I can't stop binging. I can't stop eating food. Once I start, like, I can't stop. Mind you, I had said nothing about my sexuality, being straight or gay, or that I had a boyfriend, nothing. Okay. And he says, this is like what he does. He kind of like leans back in his chair, like he's like, really in deep thought. Hey, I know what you need to do. I have it. And I'm like, okay. And he says, okay, so the next time you want to grab that Snickers bar, I also never mentioned anything about Snickers bars. Okay. The next time you go to grab that Snickers bar, go have sex. And I was like, what? Also, I'm in my 20s. Like, sex was not something I talked about at the time. Okay. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, like, whether you have a boyfriend or not, like, go have sex. And I just saw,
Oh,
yeah, it was kind of a surreal moment. And that was the last time I saw that man.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So food addiction is tied up in so much for you and so many just, wow,
I know. I know. It's like there's big
that's like,
words. And
I don't
also,
even know what to say to that. It's
I
like
know.
sometimes I'll have clients who come in with bad experiences with previous therapists, and my space is like, I don't want to judge the past therapist. And sometimes I know I might wind up finding myself with the inclination to get pulled into the same space. But that there are some things that are just like so entirely unacceptable
I
that
know.
there's just nothing to say to that.
I mean, right? Like so unethical. Um, and looking back now, now that I'm a therapist, I just see how like, and not to swayed anyone away from getting help that they need, whether it's therapy, coaching, or anything, but like, and you really need to do your work in finding the right provider because I didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, I had such limited resources and like, you know, tools, but I wouldn't have known what to look for. But yeah, I mean, there's so many providers out there that are causing so much harm. It's so scary. And another reason why I feel like I can't not do this work as a therapist, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. When you first entered 12 steps away, and you sort of answered this already, what was the question that it answered or the gap that it filled for you at the time?
Yeah. The thing that it gave me really was community. I wasn't alone. I was in a room full of people that, like, for the most part, understood what it was that I was going through. Although I always felt like I was unique, like I was saying, and like mine was always worse than everyone else's. Um, the other thing it kind of gave me was, and this is something that I like actually very much appreciate from being in Overeaters Anonymous for all those years, is like just learning at such a young age to be around all different people of all walks of life. Because you get so, I don't know if you've ever experienced 12 steps, but you get all sorts of people in those rooms. And it's really a very, like, I don't know why I'm feeling tearful right now, but it's a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
And, so I had such a big community with like the weirdest people, the most normal, like all sorts of people
Yeah.
and all different ages. And so, and I, throughout my life, that's really given me like openness to be just very kind of compassionate towards all people. And so, like, I have so many friends that are like in their 70s, they're 75, and I'm, 46. And I also have like younger friends. But yeah, I don't know. I think in that way, it's been an incredible experience as far as just kind of like being a person in the world and being compassionate. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess those are the things it gave me.
Yeah. Community and this feeling of we're in this together, even if maybe your experience
Totally.
wasn't the same as other people, we're in it together and we don't have to be externally the same in order to be in it together. There's a shared humanity.
Yeah. And like, it's like, it's hard for me to even remember because I'm like, I know that I still have really good friends that I met in OA all those years ago, but it's hard to even remember that they were in OA because we all got out of it, all of the same reasons. But yeah, like, there's like a couple of my dearest friends there in their like mid 70s, who I still talk to like pretty regularly are from OA. So
And those relationships were powerful enough to keep you there for 15 years.
yeah, I mean, it was also, I would say it was mostly fear based. Like I didn't know what else to do or where else to go. So it was like, I have to stay here. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
for a moment before, when you were talking about the community aspect, you're like, I don't know why I'm getting tearful. Can you tap into that feeling a little bit or just tell me what's
Yeah.
going on for you now as you talk about it?
Yeah. So I think if, I mean, you, Elka, and like anyone listening to this, if you have an eating disorder or had one, like this will make sense to you. But having an eating disorder is one of the most isolating things. It's so isolating and lonely. And it's like you're living in your own world of just like pure chaos. And like you can't even talk about it because no one's going to get it. It like doesn't even make sense to you. It's like you don't even have words for what's happening. And if you do talk about it, like, and again, this is my experience, like, my really good friends would care, but they would just look at me like, I mean, it was like I was an alien, like it was just like, I don't even, this is crazy, Libby. And so just managing all of it and also like all the lies, there are so many lies to manage all of it, not just to myself, but everyone and everything. I mean, just like, okay, I canceled the party. I canceled going out with my friends last night because I had a binge and I felt disgusting and fat. And then today they text me and it's like, oh, wait, I have to remember that like I said I didn't feel well, but like today I'm fine. And it's just, and then I have to like, oh yeah, what's my story? I mean, it was just so much of that. So like getting into Overeaters Anonymous, being around people that were like, for the most part, like pretty calming and just like very compassionate. Again, for the most part, there's also so much judgment in those rooms, but just kind of finally feeling like, oh my God, like you guys get it. And the other thing I really got in Overeaters Anonymous was being around people who had all different types of bodies. And again, in my experience, most of the people in OA in all the years I was in it were usually in bigger bodies. I've never been in a bigger body. I've had, thin privilege my whole life. I've definitely gone quite a bit up and down, throughout the years having an eating disorder. But so it's like as much as I was exposed to being around different types of bodies, there was this other thing happening at the same time in those rooms where it was like you all kind of had this understanding that the worst thing it could be was fat, but yet most people in those rooms were actually fat. And so it was kind of this weird, like, unspoken thing where I was kind of special because I was never considered fat. And so it was just like this like anomaly that like all of the people would like I mean, for 15 years, like question me, like, are you sure you're a compulsive overeater? Which was like always so insulting. Are you sure? And they kind of placate and like, come on, you don't really binge. And I was like, I can show you what I just binged on. Like it was like, I am not making this up. Um, so it was kind of like weird in that sense too. There was so much fat phobia. There's this thing called fat serenity. They kind of coined this term fat serenity. And it was like, don't turn out like Susan over there. She has fat serenity, which basically meant she lived in whatever body size she did and she was content. But it was like, you
Body
don't ever want,
positivity.
yeah, you can't have that serenity. And so it was just like, oh God, like that can't happen either, which is, well, that's a horrible thing to say. Um, so much.
You had started touching on what the day to day looked like for you. What was
Yeah.
the abstinence model? What did that look like in your day to day life? What was the role of the sponsor, which I know you wanted to touch on as well?
So kind of like generally speaking, my day-to-day life being an OA was I had many different sponsors, but I had one sponsor for I could have been 10 years, and she's still in my life. But and I don't blame her. We're all just kind of part of this like well, I guess it was structured, but like this like, environment that had no professionals or providers. So like we're just following this OA model. So again, like I'm not blaming her, but the codependency that happens within that relationship of sponsorship is so toxic and so bad that like I didn't know it was happening. So, anyways, going back to your question, what my kind of day looked like. Typically speaking, every day you have a call in time. So I think it was usually 6 a.m. I'd call my sponsor, and I think we'd have either 15 or 30 minutes. And kind of the first thing I'd do was give her a 24-hour food recall of what I ate the day before. And usually it was, I did really good, right? I was good. And and usually it was like I always had some kind of like white knuckling it. Like I really had an urge to binge and somehow I didn't do it. So I was good. And it'd be like, oh, good, good, good. And then, in my memory, it seems like most of the days it was like, I mean, it was like I couldn't even speak words when we get on the phone because I did it again and I did it again. And this poor woman, I mean, for years was just like, I don't know how to help you, Libby. I don't know how to help you. Like, I don't know why you can't figure it out. And I didn't blame her. I don't blame her. She's not a professional. She's just doing what she was taught. And she was the most black and white abstinent person I ever met. And she still is today. And
And it worked for her.
I mean, worked in a sense of like, she eats so little food today and she's in her mid 70s. And I don't want to live that life.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to be in a restrictive diet to maintain a certain body weight. Like that's not the life I will ever live ever again. Because it never worked for me anyways. But yeah, so again, back to the phone call. So I go over kind of like, oh, I did it again. Like this is what I binged on. And then it'd be this kind of like a little struggle back and forth of like, what can we do? Like, okay, I want you to make a commitment. Like you're not going to binge today. If you want to binge, you're going to call me. So another thing that was happening is like, when you have an eating disorder, you lose your self-trust, right? So if I can't trust myself to feed myself or eat, how can I trust myself with anything? So it kind of got to the point where I would check in with her for every decision I made. It was like, whatever boyfriend I had at the time, it'd be like, oh, so and so wants me to da da da. Like, I don't know, what do you think? And like, I usually wouldn't make decisions without her. And if I did, I would kind of be a little bit reprimanded, like, like why didn't you talk to me about this before you decided to do it that way? Um, so I oftentimes would text or call like throughout the day, every day. There were some times like I didn't feel safe by myself for many reasons. So I would stay the night at her house. So like she really was an incredible supportive person. She was just doing what she knew what to do. Like again, I don't blame her. But also in my experience, um, everyone I've ever worked with, including myself, that had an eating disorder, has an eating disorder, experiences significant codependency and perfectionism. So already being codependent, not even knowing that word at the time, and then that codependency being more and more ingrained, working with the sponsor, again, not knowing this is happening. But like looking back at it, it's just like, oh my God, like no wonder there's like codependency in every cell of my being. It's like the biggest thing I work on today. But yeah, yeah. I don't know if I answered your
Can
question.
you, yeah, can you define where the support and from what you're describing, it sounds like you needed support then, and we all do, where that support and compassion turned into codependency for you? Like, what were the markers that you look back at now and are like, this was beyond support, this was something that wasn't good for me?
The the idea of like I had to give her my food recall. Like I couldn't like make decisions on my own was kind of instilled in me. I couldn't trust myself. And I had to make sure like kind of always trying to manage that like I was doing okay enough so she wouldn't get mad at me. Um, always trying to make sure like I didn't upset her. So a lot of times like when I'd be binging, I would be thinking about her. Like, oh, she's gonna be so pissed at me tomorrow. Like, oh, and just like knowing that, wanting to be her, because in my mind she had this like perfect abstinence, this perfect recovery with what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
So like really just kind of being ob- obsessed, a little bit obsessed with how perfect I thought she was, and like just this kind of like constant like trying to just make this thing work that wasn't ever going to work. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the biggest part is just the not trusting myself, and like, yeah, just not being able to make my own decisions.
Yeah. That was the piece where I moved from I have somebody who's always got my back to I have someone I always need to answer to and that's from before I do anything.
Right. Yeah.
Tell me what changed. You got into a treatment center at some point. What
Yes.
shifted for you?
So throughout all these years, every so often, I would kind of go down the rabbit hole once again with my insurance, whatever insurance I had at the time. I like tried so hard getting into a treatment center and I was always denied because I wasn't considered underweight. Um, because I was never technically underweight. Like according to the BMI, dumb BMI. So finally, I like again one time I checked and I like got in, and it was I'll never forget. I called both my sets of parents and was like crying, like, oh my gosh, I got in, and it was like their reaction was kind of like, oh, okay, because no one like really understood that I had
Yeah.
this thing or that it was even like that big of a deal. Um, so yes, I got into treatment and there's a whole lot to say about like treatment centers. I used to work in many of them. But yeah, it was definitely the thing that planted the seed. It planted the seed, and that seed was I was sitting in an intuitive eating group one day in program, and I just I don't know what it was that was said by the dietitian, but like it was like in this moment, being in this group, I kind of was like in a little disassociation. And what happened was like it was like the ceiling of the house that we were in kind of opened, and I could see like the clouds part ways, and like these beams of sunlight just like shining down, and it was this like overall knowing that, oh my gosh, I've only ever done what I've been told. I've only ever listened to diet culture, and OA was diet culture. And it is not my fault that I'm here. Like, I finally understood that, like, it's the restriction, it's the dieting, it's the obsession, it's the everything I've been listening to and believing. Like, that's what the problem is. And it was just kind of like, holy shit, like, I don't know where to go from here, but like, I knew that. And I definitely was not recovered after treatment. Like many people, they only gave me IOP, which I definitely needed residential. And I only got about like 2.5 months of treatment time. But again, like I said, the seed was planted. So like I finally, for the first time, like I knew the answer in a different way than I ever had before. And I felt like I had been lied to my whole life. I finally started feeling like I had been in a cult, and that it was like, oh my God, diet cult. Sure. It was like, oh my God. I mean, I just felt like I had been living in this conspiracy, and I finally could see the truth. So it was pretty incredible.
So the recognition for you was my restriction is what's driving this. And
Yeah.
all the attempts I've had at recovery so far were rooted in that restriction, in the food restriction, fight my body, control
Yeah. I mean,
better.
I think like surface level, it's easy to point to the restriction being the biggest problem. And I do believe that to be true. But at the same time, as you know, there's also just so much more going on. But the
For sure.
restriction is the very first thing to look at, and like the number one reason why you're binging in the first place.
Yeah. After having the light bulb moment, what like what was your transition toward intuitive eating? Were there structured? I know in treatment centers typically there are pretty structured meals.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I started out with a lot more structure and then moved toward intuitive eating. What did that look like for you?
Well, I'd heard about intuitive eating for many years from my therapist, but so I no longer have this therapist because I don't live there anymore. But I had my therapist for 23 years, and we just stopped working together like a year and a half ago. So it was like a big deal. But so when I went into treatment, I had this therapist and outpatient. So after treatment, I went back to her. And now I can't remember your question.
Transition to intuitive eating, was
Yes.
there structured
Yeah.
eating in between? What that look like?
Yeah. So before I went to treatment, like my therapist had talked about intuitive eating. I had read the book, like I understood it as much as I could. I also was terrified of intuitive eating. I really, I just, it was one of those things again, like I'm unique, I'm different, I'm special. It's not going to work for me. I'm not a person that can give myself all allowing of eating. I'm going to be the person that truly can't stop eating the donuts for the rest of my life. I will never stop gaining weight. And I know I'm not unique in that thinking because most of the people I work with will say the same types of things. So it's like I'd known about intuitive eating. Um, in treatment, we did, there's like intuitive eating groups and whatnot. When I was in treatment, um, I think the typical treatment model is you meet with a dietitian, you get a meal plan. And at that point in my life, I was like, I can never diet again. I will never be on a meal plan again. And it was like I was intolerant of it. And I was like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'm going to rip this up. I cannot look at this. I cannot have a meal plan. And she was kind of like, okay, like let's do something different. So we came up with like just very loose kind of guideline as to like what I'm going to eat in a day. And it was more about like I think they did exchanges at this treatment center, kind of like, however many like two starches and a
Yeah.
protein and whatever for each meal or whatever. Um and that like I mean that worked for the most part. That was helpful. And then I just like, through there wasn't any one specific thing that was like, that's the thing that really took me over to the other side. It's just there's so many things I've done throughout the years that like have gotten me to where I am today. And I'm always learning and growing and getting better in, other ways as well. But yeah, I I just always really I finally kind of felt calm and seen with the idea of intuitive eating. I remember like reading the book and it was like, oh my God, like these ladies get it. They get it. And they were speaking now about this diet world. It was like uh, 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 the same message I like got in treatment, So it was like, okay, like this is the right path. And then just getting more and more into it. And I remember one day when I was in treatment, I was walking home because I had to like sell my car to be in treatment. But I was walking home from treatment and I remember walking across the crosswalk. And I had always been, like I said before, like just so freaked out to go all in with intuitive eating because I was so terrified of weight gain because for 20 years I had just gone up and down, up and down, up and down with my weight. And then I was just, just scared. But I remember walking across the street this one night and I just started crying because I realized like, Libby, if you don't do this, like if you don't trust, if you don't go all in, if you don't have faith, you're never going to change. You're never going to change. And it was just like, okay, like you have to do this. And so, yeah, I just really went all in and I definitely gained weight, like I think most of us do when you begin intuitive eating because you kind of have to, you know. Um, and at, some point again for many people, some people it like kind of evens out and um but yeah, I just kind of knew I had to do it.
So you started out with looser guidelines, and at a certain point, intuitive eating like fully clicked for you, and you were like, "This is terrifying, and I'm going to just do it." And by do it, you mean just like I'm letting go of all food rules and eating whatever and when I want. Was that, or can you explain that to
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so what I guess I mean when I say that, and this is not part of intuitive eating, this is kind of so throughout
Mm.
all these years, like after treatment, like I still struggled. Um, and I was like absolutely determined to find the solution to figure this out. So I kind of would take like bits and pieces of all these things that I kind of learned over the years. So when I say go all in, like this is what I mean. And when I say this to my clients, they look at me like, I am not doing that. So, I mean, I was like, you are doing this, you're going to get better. Because, like I said earlier, I really thought I was going to die. I think I said that earlier. Anyways, so I would go to the store and, like, maybe on this weekend, let's say it's a Saturday, I was going to do chips. I used to like chips were a huge binge food. And I would get like big bags, like 5 different types of chips. And I mean, I remember my friends would be like, oh, like, let's go out this weekend. I'd be like, I probably can't. Like, I'm doing planned binges. So I would sit at my kitchen table. I lived alone, so I felt like, safe and comfortable. And I would just sit there. And I came up with this kind of like exercise where it's like I call it calling out the chatter. And you basically are having a conversation with the two voices, right? Like your ed voice and then I call it your higher brain voice, which is like,
Yeah,
your wise mind. And you kind of have
yeah.
this like just conversation. And what it does is it like kind of makes you think of what's happening in a different state, like in a different part of your brain. You have like more consciousness. And yeah, so just binging while I'm calling out this exercise over and over and over again. And at some point it shifts. And it might not shift that day.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're sitting there with all your binge foods in front of you, intentionally eating them. Is it just like eating until you're like, I'm done, I don't want anymore? Or,
It it was more like so with this exercise,
yeah.
it's a verbal dialogue. So like before I would start eating, so kind of like my rule with doing this was like, okay, you're doing all allowing, you're eating all the things, you're allowing yourself to binge. The only thing you have to do is be conscious, aware, and do this exercise. So like before I even started eating, I'd do the exercise, call out the chatter. And then
Mm.
I start eating, call out the chatter. Eat more, call out the chatter. Eat more, call out the chatter. Just constantly doing that. This was not fun, by the way. but like I was
Mm.
so determined to like get better. And I also just like, I think in the back of my mind was like, there has to be other people like me out there in the world that like are having a similar experience where like they just can't figure it out and get better.
Yeah.
And so I also at the same time was like, there's going to be a day when I can be able to teach this to somebody and like
Yes.
I can help somebody else.
That
So
gives
yeah,
some
that's what
sense
I
of
did.
purpose to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that with chips. And then another time I did it with like different peanut butters. Another thing I did because I don't, do
One
you,
sec, before you go to the next thing, calling
yeah,
out the chatter. Can you describe that to me? What are
yeah.
you actually
So,
doing when you say call out the chatter?
yeah. So, I mean, I can just kind of like actually do it so you can
Yeah,
hear what it
do it.
sounds like. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say I'll give you a scenario. Let's say I'm sitting in front of, let's say it was however many years ago, and I'm sitting in front of 5 bags of chips that are my quote unquote binge foods, and I'm trying to get better. Okay, let's just say that's the scenario. Okay, so this is the exercise. Chatter says you can't do this. Chatter says you're never going to stop. Chatter says you're so disgusting. Chatter says you think you're going to get better. Stop fooling yourself. Chatter says you're just fat and gross. Chatter says you're going to continue to gain weight. Chatter says you're never going to get better. Okay, Chatter, what do you suggest Lippy do? Chatter suggests not calling out the chatter and just eating all the chips or putting all the chips away and never eating them ever again. Okay, is that going to serve Libby? No. Okay, higher brain, what do you suggest Libby do? Higher brain suggests Libby take a pause and remind herself why she's doing this and that it's simply an experiment. Will that serve Libby? Yes. So you're just kind of having this like dialogue. And the thing is that was frustrating for me and is for my clients as well is when you first kind of start doing it, you can call out the chatter and do this exercise. Your higher brain can come up with like the truly like better solution, but you still might do the chatter suggestion, but that's okay because it's like coming from like a different area of your brain and it shifts over time. And like whether it's like hours, days, weeks, it like you just kind of don't. It's like, wait, oh my God, I've had chips in the cupboard for a day and I forgot for that one day. I will never forget the day I forgot I had ice cream in the freezer. I think I actually cried. It was miraculous to me. So yeah, so like one day I did chips. I think the next weekend I probably did peanut butters and
That's
another
awesome.
thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I know
No,
I'm
I was
talking a
just
lot.
saying that's awesome. And this is so fascinating to me. And you're calling out the chatter. I'll come back to my own experience a little bit, but I feel like I approached it in a very similar way to you, but in very different areas. I'll touch on my story a little bit soon, but I want to hear
Yeah.
what you were about to say.
Okay. And I want to know like if you did this or experienced this, but like, I mean, for decades, I was so conditioned to eating diet foods. I truly, truly did not know what I liked. I didn't know like what things tasted like. And like truly, I only ever just wanted to be normal again. At this point, it was like, I don't care if I don't have the perfect body. I just want to be a normal person. So I remember like one day I was just going to do these blind taste tests on myself and I lived alone. Like there's no one helping me. And so I remember like yogurt. I was conditioned to eating like the non-fat plain yogurt. So I just went and got all different brands, all different types, and I put the yogurt in like the same type of a bowl and then put like a little number on the bottom that was like, adjacent to whatever type of yogurt. And like, yeah, like that's what I would do. I did that with yogurt, tortillas, sodas. And it's interesting because, and things have shifted over the years. At first, I most liked the diet foods, like truly. Now that's not the case. And I think I was just so used to that taste. Now I mostly like the not diet foods. There's still things like Diet Coke. I can't stand regular soda. So like I would drink Diet Coke over regular Coke. But yeah, so I did that too.
Yeah. So I I relate so much to the desperation and the intensity and the drive of I'm just going to do this. And I'm also a teacher, like sort of by nature, and have been in a lot of contexts. So I also had that like I'm going to find the answer and share it. And so my process feels very similar to yours in a lot of ways, but the content very different and almost opposite. So I had that almost like your chatter says exercise, but with the binge eating. And by that time, I understood the restrict binge cycle. I don't know. Are you familiar with brain over binge?
Are you kidding? That is where
Okay.
I got so much like ding.
Okay.
That's one of the podcasts I follow.
Oh,
Madeline
yeah.
Hanson.
Okay. So, yeah, that was one of my first change moment books as well.
I love, yes. So we have like
And
the same language.
okay, yeah. So that's where you have the higher brain. But
Yep.
anyway, so that was where I understood the restrict binge cycle. I followed more. So then she moves on to the rational recovery, right? The Jack Trimpe, which is like observe the urge without, which on a separate note, a lot of people are opposed to that approach when it's applied to eating disorders and feel like it's unkind, labeling your brain, blah, blah, blah. Um,
Right.
if you translated it into a different language, you wind up with acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive diffusion, mindfulness, which people like much better.
Yeah.
Which again just goes to show that the same process can be translated in different ways. But
Right.
anyway, so I wound up much more on the. So I understood the restrict binge cycle. There was also a part of it that extended beyond that. Like food had become my comfort in a lot of ways. I struggled with depression as well as many of us
Yeah.
do.
Same.
And I so and I didn't really get into intuitive eating. I don't think I even learned about it till later. And anyway, so I had used that approach with the urges to binge, and what that looked like for me was I would like let's say I'm at the table with my family and I'm Orthodox Jewish, so we have like food, tons of events around food all the time, or just like family meals and stuff like that. So I'd like be having really, really strong urges. And if I felt like I needed more space, I'd even go to my room so I could take some time out and stay with it and just be like, okay, what is this urge? I'm noticing I feel this tension in my chest. I feel this emptiness in my belly.
Yeah.
Stay with it until I started to get comfortable with it. And then the voices in my head again, very similar to yours, you know, you're going to give in, like, why don't you just do it? And just observing those until again, I came to a place where I was like, okay, I could have these thoughts, I can have these sensations, and it's
Yeah.
fine.
Right.
At the same time, and this is where we differ, in some ways, my recovery was almost abstinence-based at the start.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had also seen an acupuncturist and was like looking into all these other stuff like brain fog and like trying to figure out what was going on. And she's like, wheat refined like table sugar and dairy are not good for you. So I use that urge watching and separating to be like, and this is a little bit more like your 12 step stuff.
Yeah.
But to be like, okay, like I will and I don't know if you're familiar with this is another like pretty it's a love-hate book. It's basically rational recovery translated into binge eating or overeating, whatever you want to call it. Glenn Livingston's Never Binge Again. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I'm not sure. I think I know what you're talking about, and I'm like picturing the cover, and I
Okay.
think anyways, go on.
Anyway, most of the therapists who see it are like, this is
It's a
bullshit diet culture and
scream.
nobody should ever read it.
Yeah,
For me, though.
I know what you're talking about. I returned it immediately.
Yeah. Um, anyway, for me though, that was like that really helped me at the time.
Yeah.
And I very much followed that, like, just these are the things I don't want to be having.
Yeah.
Stayed away from them. Anyway, at a certain point now I would say I don't have any clear food rules. I eat what I want when I want. And I think when that started to shift, it wasn't any light bulb moment or anything dramatic. It was just sort of like as I got stronger in my recovery, I wasn't having as many urges. I felt stronger. I started to drop some of the rules and at a certain point was like, okay, I eat however much I want at certain times of day. And then when I had actually dropped the no wheat, sugar, dairy thing was just like I was dating the person who's not my husband and like we were out of state and it was just like firstly like I was far enough from my eating disorder that my mind just wasn't on it and I had other things
Yeah.
to think about and it was just like okay whatever like so and then I think when I dropped the last of the food rules was actually when I got pregnant because I was just like I like
Yeah.
there's no other way to eat other than my body right now. Like if the only thing I feel like I can stomach now is pretzels or whatever, that's what I'm gonna
Whatever.
eat. At the same time, I would say like I still tend toward like I don't really like some of the things that I used to binge on or I used to binge on
Totally.
like you said, but like some of the like very, very sweet packaged food. Like I feel like I've lost a taste for it from not eating for so long. And I don't know that I don't have any, like I can eat a cookie and I'll be fine and I won't have any strong reaction. But I don't have any strong motivation to like really bring that back in.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
um, so
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I I know I already told you this when we talked before today, but I so appreciate what you're doing with your podcast. And Elka, you're so like I can tell I've been a guest on like 35 podcasts. I'm not saying that to be arrogant at all, just like in my experience. Like I can tell you have so much true like kindness and compassion towards people. And I love that like you're giving a place for people, clinicians, to tell their true story. And it's like, I'm so glad that book worked for you. I don't have to judge that. That's your experience. I am
Yeah.
so glad OA worked for whoever it worked for. If it worked for them and they say they're happy, like that is lovely and wonderful. And we all get to have these different experiences.
Yeah, I so much appreciate that. Thanks so much. And which brings me back to a question I had earlier. You mentioned that some of the people from OA are still in your life now.
Yeah.
What was the process of leaving? Because from your
Yeah.
description, you found real community there. What was the process of leaving like, and how have those relationships evolved since then?
Yeah, it was a big deal because being in those rooms when one person leaves, the idea is, ooh, they went out. They're not doing well. They went out. They're kind of on the streets, if you will. And and I knew this because I was there for 15 years and that's how we talked. It was very gossipy, super, super gossipy, a very gossipy community. And so I knew that they're all going to think that Libby went out. She's not doing well. She went off the deep end, even though it was like, oh no, for the first time, I actually feel like going to get better. So that happened. So people that I was like really close with, not the closest, but like, so I'll say the good friends, a few of them I'm still friends with. The friends, most of them would contact me and be like, hey, we're worried about you. When are you coming back? Are you binging? I mean, there's such an obsession with the binging part of it. Or have you gained weight? Are you getting fat? Are you like embarrassed to show up again? And I wasn't hiding and I would just say like, no, like I went to treatment and I don't think I can go back to OA. Like it's not going to work for me. And yeah, I mean, it was like a very black and white. I lost that community like pretty immediately. Um, and that was very devastating to me because it was one of those things. It was a similar experience when I was in college in undergrad and I was in a sorority and I was only in it for 3 years because I dropped my fourth year because by my third year, it was like so devastating to see how like, and I'm not just towards me, but just how these girls would treat each other. I mean, it was like such a toxic environment and how many horrible things these girls would do to me. I mean, like truly horrid things. And that I even was there for 3 years. And like I was such good friends with so many of the girls in the sorority. And the fourth year, it was like, I have to quit. Like, this is not good for me. And I will never forget, like, I'd say half of those girls were like, I mean, you're done. You're like X'd out. You were never in the sorority. Give back all your things. And it was just disgusting. And so that experience in OA like really reminded me of the sorority experience. So yeah, it sucked.
I wonder, as you're describing that, if those experiences in some ways led you to what we're doing here, like dialogue, and I can hear different people's stories and stay in contact.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, and I've heard actually the person who I interviewed on the other side about the
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to call it pro food addiction or
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
sharing a little bit of a similar feeling related to the eating disorder community, where it's like if you don't follow our guidelines or whatever those are, you're out.
Yeah. And I feel that too in our communities, like in all, I think
Mhm.
maybe we touched on this before, but um
Yeah.
there's so much like negative in the like eating disorder groups on Facebook that we're
Yeah.
in, like the provider groups. I usually won't ever say anything, ask questions, or make comments because like You better watch out. You're going to get screamed at if you
Yeah.
say one thing wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel that.
It's so easy to get shut out or so you lost that community instantly when you rejected the philosophy, and yet you're still in contact with people from there now.
Like there's two people I really can think of.
Yeah.
There might, I think that's really it. And they're very dear friends,
Yeah.
but yeah, because they also have like the same mindset I do about what OA was when we were all in it together.
Mhm. Yeah. So they moved away from that model along with you,
Yeah. I mean, not at the same
or
time as I
maybe a
did, but
different time, but
eventually. Yeah.
yeah. Your sponsor,
Mhm.
uh, you're still connected with her now.
I wouldn't say we're that close, but yeah, we are still
Yeah.
connected in some way.
I imagine that relationship
We have a lot of different
went through
beliefs.
its ups and downs and evolved a lot.
Yeah. And it's interesting too because it's really hard. It's like, when you are raised in a family and you guys have your family roles, and then like once you say move out, let's say you go to college and you realize, oh shoot, that's not really who I am, and you kind of come back and you're kind of like, actually,
Mhm.
this is who I am, but like you can't change because that dynamic is so strong. It's kind of how it is with us because like in recent years, it's like when I'm with her, she talks to me like I'm the old Libby, and I can feel very insulted because it's like I'm a full grown adult. Like you don't get to talk to me that way. Like very insulting type of language. Um, and I know that that's just kind of like the dynamic. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
challenging.
As you were talking about her before, the image that I had was it's like a parent or a family relationship. So it's so interesting to me that you
Yeah.
describe it that way. How do you bring this all into now you work with people? So you're working beyond, like, in some ways, building off your story and also beyond it. What do you bring to, or what's your message to the people who come to you who are like, I'm
Yeah.
addicted to food or I can't stop eating?
Yeah. Kind of like the way I kind of approach working with people is I'm going to meet you where you're at, of course. And like, I know for me, it really mattered to understand. And so I give a lot of like concepts and ideas and like the idea, like what diet culture is, what fat phobia is, the systems in our country, why healthcare is the way it is, like pharmaceutical stuff, like, the whole BMI thing, how overnight everyone wakes up and they're considered, I'm quoting the word obese because it's not
Yep.
not a good word to say anymore. But so I think do a good job of having them like understand like where this all came from because most
Yeah.
everyone is like self-blaming and like that's part of the pattern of keeping you stuck in the eating disorder. So I think really giving like the explanation as to like why we're here in the first place. Um and and then also like I come at it from like a brain kind of approach, like I was saying, like the chatter exercise and brain over binge kind of concepts. Um and really just this probably sounds like generic, like as any therapist would probably this, but like, I don't know, just really like wherever you're at, we're going to figure it out. It's okay. Even if you come to me
Yeah.
and you're on Ozempic, we'll figure it out. Like, it's okay. I'm not going to scold you. You're never going to be in trouble. It's okay that you still want to lose weight. That's okay. Of course you do. We just can't act on it. So I think, I mean, I hope, I like to think that I'm like, they feel very like trustworthy with me and like heard and understood and that like I'm never going to judge them. But yeah, I think that's kind of like what I bring to the table, if you will.
Yeah. And describing the systems that got people to where they're at so they don't have that, I'm crazy, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And also really staying with whatever their process is in that moment, even if it doesn't align with your own recovery or like just really staying with the person in front of you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
Yeah. Well, so libbysupan.com is my website and it goes over like my therapy stuff and my coaching stuff because I have two different kind of businesses and they're different. So if you are curious about either or both. You can look at my website, libbysupan.com. And on social media, I'm Food Freedom with Libby. I'm mostly on Instagram and then Facebook and TikTok. But yeah, so it's Food Freedom with Libby and libbysupan.com. And anyone can
Cool.
reach out to me with anything, any questions. Like, I'm happy to talk to anyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Olka. This was awesome.